So one of the most loved multiplication facts is multiplying by 10. Kids love it because it looks so easy. They don't really need to understand it to understand what's going on, but they just remember that if you take any number and you want to multiply it by 10, you just quote, add a 0 on the end. All right, so multiplying by 10 adds a 0 on the end. Now, as you can hopefully tell by now, that strategy and that mnemonic is completely devoid of any connection to what's actually happening when you're multiplying a number by 10. So, for example, if you have this 10 groups of 23 down here, we're going to skip a little bit. So we have 23, so this is 10 and another 10 and 3. And we're going to take that 10 of those. Right? So what we had was in the original number, 23, we had 2 tens, 2 rods, let's say, or strings, and 3 singles. Right? Now, once we multiply by 10, so we take 10 groups of these rods and 10 groups of that rod. Right? So now instead of having 2 tens, 2 rods, we actually have 2 hundreds. So what's happened is what used to be 2 tens, 1 and 2, now once you've taken 10 groups of them, become the next place value, become the hundreds. So what's going to happen is these coefficients, these numbers, the 2 and 3, these digits, instead of before multiplication by 10, this represented tens. Now if you take 10 of them, right, multiply by 10, this is now going to represent hundreds. The 3 used to represent ones, but if you take 10 of them, it's going to represent tens. Each one of these ones is now going to be strung, or is now going to be a rod. So what used to happen in this initial 23 is now going to be actually happening in the next larger place value. So let's go back to question 1. We have some choices of how we're going to create this mnemonic or the shortcut for multiplying by 10. So to multiply by 10, put a 0 at the end of the number. That's better than add 0 to a number. So let's actually do this. To multiply by 10, add 0 to the number. Put a 0 at the end of the number. At least it is mathematically correct. Mathematically correct. When we say add 0 to a number, well, any number plus 0 is itself. So it doesn't make sense to add 0 to a number. So this would certainly not be, it's actually a false statement. Now let's look at B. Move the decimal point 1 place to the right. We say that too, right? If we had 2.3 times 10, well, we say we take the decimal place and we move it to the right. Okay. Sure. That's mathematically maybe correct, but it still has. But let's look at what the connection is to what we're actually doing with the numbers, and then move all digits 1 place to the left is the other option, and that is another explanation. All 4 of these sentences are actually equally long or short. But what we need to do is we need to find which one actually has anything to do with how we think about number when we're modeling it with base 10 blocks or with anything else, or with just looking at it as place value. And you notice that put 0 at the end of a number actually is not meaningful at all. So we're going to discount that. We already talked about add 0 to the number as not being meaningful. Now move the decimal point 1 place to the right versus move all the digits 1 place to the left. Now the decimal point itself, if we're going to just be moving decimal points, the decimal point itself does not represent the size of a number. The decimal point is a dot on the paper. What represents the number is the fact that the digit to the left of the decimal place is the ones, and the digit to the right begins with decimals, with less than 1 or a tenth. So moving the decimal place is not really a meaningful statement either. We can't really understand what does that mean. So what that leaves us with is this last statement. Multiply the number by 10. To multiply the number by 10, move all the digits one place to the left. Now that makes sense with what we were talking about earlier. So this digit number 2, instead of being representing 2 rods before multiplication, after multiplication is going to be representing 2 flats. And this digit number 3, instead of representing 1, 2, 3 singles, after multiplication is going to be representing 3 rods, because we'll have 10 groups. So that 2 started off representing rods or groups of 10. After multiplying by 10, it's now going to be representing groups of 100. So if we are really going to be looking at a short rule for multiplying by 10, we need to make sure that we give up the rule that we actually often use right now, that is not true and it's not meaningful. And also be very careful about the rules that are true but are not meaningful. Okay, so it is true that put a 0 at the end of a number as long as it's a whole number, or move the decimal point one place to the right as long as there is a decimal place. So both of those things are true, but they're not meaningful in for the actual number and making sense of that number.